Hello, I'm Steve, Editor-in-Chief of the blog. As you may know, Luxembourg firmed up the arm's length principle on the 1st of January 2017, meaning financing between different units of the same company should be carried out as if they were unrelated firms. Now that the industry players had about 3 weeks to analyze the new transfer pricing rules, what lessons have we learned? I'm joined here by Luek de Preter, PwC Luxembourg transfer pricing leader, to feel the pulse. So Luek, how did companies react?
Hi Steve. Well, they reacted a bit surprised that Luxembourg overnight changed their interpretation on the application of the law. And in essence, it means that there is, in line with the OECD developments, an increased focus on substance, on risks, and on commercial rationale and comparability. Now let's take substance to start with. It's the ability of the Luxembourg entity to exercise its function and manage and control the associated risks with its own employees in Luxembourg. So it may not have to be full-time employees, and supporting functions can be outsourced as long as key decisions are taken in Luxembourg. What the tax authorities clearly don't like is structures where there are only annual board meetings with external board members, though Luxembourg residents, to sign papers. The Luxembourg entity has to be in the information flow and the decision-making process. Now let's move on to the risk aspect and the capacity to bear the risk. In first instance, it's the expectation that the Luxembourg entity is fully exposed to risk on its financial assets, the default risk, and needs to have the associate equity to bear the risk if it happens. Obviously, it's possible to mitigate the risk. However, if the risk is effectively eliminated completely, the Luxembourg entity would not be considered as the beneficial owner, and the authorities would exchange information that the Luxembourg entity doesn't meet the new circular. And comparability, that's another lesson we need to tackle. When we perform a transfer pricing and value chain analysis and a quantification of the compensation for Luxembourg, it's important to demonstrate the commercial rationale for the structure in its totality, and that independent parties with a comparable functional profile as the Luxembourg entity would enter into a comparable set of arrangements. Otherwise, you risk a recharacterization by the authorities. Now finally, what they have done in the circular is apply a few simplification rules or safe harbor rules. The old rule was if your capacity to bear the risk is limited to 1% of the invested assets with a maximum of 2 million, that's gone. Now the Luxembourg entity may have a functional profile that is similar to that of a regulated entity. If that's the case, then you could determine the level of adequate equity with the concept of, simply said, the Basel III approach. Then the next step would be, well, what would be the return on that equity? And in the authorities' view, the market rate would be 10% after tax. They also make a comment for pure intermediary functions that do meet substance requirements, that the compensation should result in a 2% after-tax return on the assets invested. So if you meet the simplification safe harbor rules, then there is a less necessity for a full-blown transfer pricing documentation. But it may be expensive with these percentages. Now we are in active discussions with the tax administration on clarifying questions that we have or our clients may have. And they suggested that they may issue frequently asked questions, similar to what they are doing for country-by-country reporting on the treatment of intra-group financing.
Thank you, Luek, and thanks for watching.